And then we are live. Okay, Bismillah. Salatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. Rabbi shahri sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to today's interview with one of my favorite person on social media. We've had Kathryn on the show twice before. Mashallah, Kathryn Jones is a coach. She's the founder of Back to the Fitrah Mentoring Academy. And she's been very, very active on social media. I've been following her for a number of years, and I just love her posts. Kathryn, welcome.
Thank you so much. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
It's an honor to have you here, joining us all the way from Australia, mashallah.
Alhamdulillah. It's always my pleasure to be able to share, especially on the important topic of parents. I feel that parents are really struggling and they get a lot of conflicting advice, and so it does make it very challenging. So anything we can do to make their lives easier is great, inshallah.
Yes, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. It is, like I always say, I share because I make mistakes. I'm learning from my mistakes, and I don't want younger moms to make the same mistakes, subhanallah. And disclaimer, I'm not parenting expert, but I do love sharing what I learn from people and coaches.
I don't think any of us are ever experts in parenting, because as soon as we think that, our children will bring along another challenge to test us.
That's right, subhanallah, that's right. Okay, we've got people joining us, mashallah. Please let us know where in the world you are joining us today and what are you looking forward to in today's webinar, inshallah. So today's topic is emotionally resilient parents, and let's just jump straight in. Kathryn, I'd like to acknowledge your work, mashallah, the dedication and commitment. Like I said, I've benefited a lot from your posts. I think for about nearly 8 or 10 years, I've been following you on social media. She's very active, mashallah. So I just want to start saying thank you. I really appreciate the work that you do, mashallah. And are you the resilient parent? I mean, emotionally resilient parent, if you don't mind me asking.
I would say these days, yes, I am an example of emotionally resilient parent. That doesn't mean I'm perfect, and doesn't mean that I don't sometimes lose the plot, because that's just human. But overall, I would say I'm an emotionally resilient parent.
Okay, so how would you describe? We know resilience, right? It's the ability to withstand the setbacks or challenge, or being able to recover from stress, etc., right? But how would you describe emotionally resilient parent?
So this life is a test, and I think one of our biggest tests is when we have children. Having children is going to bring out the best and the worst in all of us. It's just how it works, right?
I agree.
And so if we're passing the test of being of parenting, then we're being an emotional resilient parent. So an emotionally resilient parent is not losing themselves to their own emotions through the parenting challenges. So we're able to stay calm. In fact, what we would describe an emotional resilient parent as is a parent who's confident, compassionate, and calm. So it doesn't matter what your child comes to you with or does, even in front of your eyes. You handle it with confidence, compassion, and calm. And that doesn't mean we don't set limits or we just let kids run amok. That's not what I mean by calm at all. It means that when we set limits, it's done in a very respectful but firm way. So there's still a calmness inside. We haven't lost ourselves emotionally in the moment.
SubhanAllah. And I was just looking at the Webster Dictionary of Resilience, right? And it says that the ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change, and also to keep going in the face of adversity, and recovering by stress. And I think stress is the main word here, because, we have too much stress in our lives, and why do you think so? Like, why is uh, our times that everybody is stressed, like parents are stressed all the time? What is the reason?
I think there's actually a number of reasons. As it was described, in the end of times, life was going to get faster, where, a week would seem like a day would seem like an hour. I can't remember the exact, details, but time will speed up. And I think we live in a very fast-paced world now. I think we also have become accustomed to instant gratification, so we've lost our sense of patience around things. We expect things and we expect them now. And our children are growing up in an era where they're learning more virtually than they are in real life. And so they're losing a lot of the natural human skills that come from working together as human beings, because they're doing a lot of stuff digitally and virtually instead of in person. So I think that all of these different factors together on how our lifestyle has changed, I think it's broken down the family unit a lot. Sadly, I think there is an intention behind that in terms of a big wide world agenda, but we won't get into that.
Yes, definitely.
At the end of the day, we're facing very different times to any other era. And so being a resilient parent is even more important than any other time ever, in order to help our kids navigate through this in a healthy way.
Yeah. I agree. I was reading recently Dr. Gabor Mate's couple of books, like When the Body Says No or Hold On to Your Kids. And I could see, I could kind of link it with the concepts that he presented. Basically, he's saying the parents now have too much stress because of the change, economical, social change in a society. And it has a lot to do with consumerism and materialism. This is a social construct, right? So consumerism, materialism. So both parents end up, having to work. And so the stress mainly comes from like you said, how the family unit in society, the role of men and women, like, changed so much over the past decade, and with both parents having to work and being outside the home and children being left in childcare. I think there's so much social structures that have been broken down or replaced, and then it all leads to stress, isn't it?
It depends. I think that part of the reason that we're struggling with so much stress is also a weakening psychologically of people from the abundance of information. So, in prior times, life was slower, so there was more time to process, think things through, slow down. Weekends were a time when people slowed down more. There was the whole concept of family coming together and slowing down together. And we're now in what we call the information era. So I've been parenting for 27 years. And in that 27 years, I've seen immense changes. My stepsons, who are now in their 30s, when they were young kids and I was, parenting them, we didn't have really to worry about mobile phones and those sorts of things, because they're really only just coming into play. And the mobile phones, they could only do, texting to one another, and the mobile phone plans were so expensive anyway that kids didn't have that sort of access to them. But now moving down the track, my 11-year-old son now, there's always the concern of him having a digital addiction because his entire life, handheld devices have been available his entire life. And so I've seen the difference in parenting, and the different challenges just changed in the time frame where I've been a parent. I saw the difference between myself and my younger brother. So when I was born, we really didn't have computers. In fact, when I went through, was it in high school, and we did a thing in one of our subjects on computers, we would do those color in punch cards that would then be sent to this massive computer in another, you had to drive the cards there, and we'd send the cards, and they'd bring back our printout that said the word hello. We created a program that said hello, and it was so exciting to get our printouts back a week later or something like that. That was computers. But even my brother, my half brother, who was born when I was 13, by that stage we were starting to see computers come into the home. And because my dad was always on the front line of technology and always had the first time anything came out, my younger brother grew up with games. Now, I hate computer games because I never grew up with them, but I can even see the difference between myself and my younger brother. So technology is certainly playing a role in it. It is breaking down our resilience, but also just the information overload. The statistics showed that in the 1980s, I think we consumed the equivalent of something like 40 newspapers in a day. By when was it? I've forgotten all the dates now. It was just before all the handheld devices came out anyway. We were now already consuming something like 197 newspapers a day. Now, this is now a decade or so later again, and everybody has handheld devices in their hands all the time. I don't know what the numbers are, but that's how much information our brain is being bombarded with. And we simply don't have the capacity to really process that properly, and so we're not. And then, of course, there's all that, the fact that we can have access to conflicting information all the time. Let's go back to the topic of parenting. Poor parents, once upon a time, there would just be, their parents and aunties and, people around which would pass on parenting tips and this. Now you can actually in 5 minutes watch about 3 different videos on different parenting techniques and then become completely confused what to do. Everybody's telling you this is better and that's better. But I've been studying Islamic pedagogy, and so we've been learning a lot about tarbiyah. So bringing it back to Islamic concepts, it's all about the relationship. And the relationship with our children. And one of the things I think we were going to talk about was, how do we have resilience, and how does this play into the picture? So back to the Fitrah, what we teach is that we're born resilient. We're born patient, we're born confident. You just have to look at a young child, or, they're learning to walk. They'll fall down, they'll get back up. They'll fall down, they'll get back up. They don't lose patience with it. They just keep doing it till they get there. They persist. They're patient with the test and challenge that they're going through. Then you look at, young kids playing in the sandpit together or at the park together. They don't care if there's different colored skin. They don't, they might have a fight for a second over this, who's got the sand pail and who's got the spade, or over a toy or something, but then they've forgotten it in a second and they're laughing and playing together a second later. They don't hold grudges. So this is, you look at that, this is how emotionally well we were born. So why isn't it we're not being emotionally resilient when we're older? It's because, well, one thing when we were children, the adults around us weren't resilient, and so the world seemed very scary. So this is the number one reason why it's important for us to be resilient parents, is that when things seem scary in a kid's world, if we're their rock and we're calm and we're confident and we're handling them with compassion while we're navigating the challenges, we're showing them the world isn't that scary, you're going to be okay. But if we're freaking out and losing it because we can't cope, kids are starting to lose their resilience. They're losing it because they're starting to build a story that the world isn't safe or the world is scary because look how my parents are acting. I mean, it must be scary for them to be acting like that. So we've learned that through our upbringing, but that doesn't mean that we can't unlearn it or that thinking can't fall away and our natural resilience then to shine through, because that is very possible, and it's exactly what happened for me. I was not a resilient parent at the beginning. I had a very difficult
Actually, this is what I wanted to ask. You know, you're saying your eldest is 27, right?
My eldest son is actually 24, but I have stepsons who are in their 30s. So I started parenting 27 years ago.
And your youngest, I've seen his pictures. Allah Mabarak, may Allah preserve him. He's quite young, right? He's 10, 11?
He's 11 now, yeah.
So, like, how have you changed as a parent? Is it, you know, over the years, I always wonder, is it like, I've certainly changed in 15 years. Is it because of the readings and like you were actively trying to learn, or is it because of the, you know, the age? They say wisdom comes with age and experience, like how the journey took place?
Because there's just as many old people who aren't wise and young people who are. And so wisdom isn't an age thing. Wisdom is to do with a clarity of mind. When your mind is clear and you're not, you know, caught up in all the emotions of things, then you're actually in that space where you're noticing how Allah is guiding you, and that's where the wisdom comes from. The wisdom doesn't come from us. We're not naturally wise. I mean, we have wisdom because that's our natural innate connection with Allah, fitrah state that we were born with. But that's coming through from Allah, like listening to how Allah is guiding us. And I don't mean that we're just sort of sitting there going, okay, Allah, how are you guiding me? It's that being in that state of taqwa and tawakkul, that consciousness of Allah in every moment and every move, how Allah fits into the picture. So if it's really testing, is remembering that, well, yeah, this life is just a test. Remembering that Allah will never burden us with more than we can bear. Remembering that in the remembrance of Allah, the hearts find rest. All of this being naturally in us keeps us sane through those moments. And so
it was more to do you increasing your own knowledge. Like reading books
increasing my
actively.
Well, it wasn't just reading books, although I read a lot of books and I know a lot. I've read quite a bit of Gabor Maté, Alfie Kohn, and lots of different. And I'm trained to be a parenting instructor through hand-in-hand parenting. But I think what made the difference was the work. I don't like to call it work, because the part where it really made a difference, it didn't really feel like work, but the changes in myself, the learning more about understanding my psychology, understanding my human experience, understanding my emotions. Once I understood that, and then understanding that, you know, children's behavior, this is the key, one of the key shifts. Understanding that children's behavior is not the problem, it's the symptom. That if you're having problems with your child, then there's something going on underneath. And if we resolve what's going on underneath, the behavior naturally comes back on track. Believing that children are innately good. And that shift in understanding, that's massive.
Yes, I agree. And I love Dr. Gabor Maté, you know, in his book, Hold On to Your Kids, he explains the word acting out. And, you know, the reason we say acting out, imagine if you have something to explain and you don't know how to explain it, like you have no words, you know, you don't know what expressions to use, and so you would naturally try to act out, right? So it is a perfect word when we use it for children's behavior. When we say, oh, children are acting out, so it means they're actually trying to say, express something that's going on beneath, like, you know. So you have to meet the problem, like don't meet the behavior, just go underneath the surface. They're trying to act out something that they can't express with words, they can't explain with language, they don't have the lingua for it yet, they don't know how to, or they don't know what's happening to them. That's when they act out. It was really like, you know, having that sink into my mind. Yes, when my daughter is being rude, you know, talking back, you know, answering me back and not listening, it does take patience for you to be able, what's going on here, you know, like just hold your anger and what's happening to her.
So that's actually what you've just said there is really important. Having a curiosity for what's going on with them, rather than look at their behavior and it's straight away consequences, punishments, whatever, shouting, yelling, screaming, all the things that parents resort to get the behavior back on track. Instead, having that curiosity, what's going on? Why is my child behaving like that? And I'd love to shed a little bit of light on that, because this also fits in with the stress, right?
Yeah.
When we understand why our children are behaving the way they're behaving, we get very stressed by their behavior, because we have a lot of thinking. Like, if they're behaving badly in public, it's like, what will everyone think? If all the family's around, what's the family going to think?
Yes.
Or people start saying, control your kids, or things like that. We start stressing. When we don't understand our children's behavior and we're trying to implement all the parenting tools that they give you out there that don't work, they might work occasionally, but not satisfactorily, you feel so hopeless. And that is the stress. The stress is the hopeless thinking. When you actually understand it, it turns around. So if a child is pushing back against us, it can mean one of many things, but quite often it's coming from a sense of injustice. And as adults, we go, yeah, but what injustice have they experienced? You know, they're just kids. Well, a child, we don't say acting out, we say being off track. So you're displaying off track behavior, because that's even more neutral. Because if child's off track, it's like, what do we do to get them back on track? So it's off track and on track. Instead of naughty or stubborn or disrespectful, all the other words which are very emotive and will get us riled up and want to give them consequences and punish them and be angry with them, it's like, my child's off track, right? That's off track behavior. When we think of it like that and have that curiosity, why are they off track? If we go back and then look at what's been leading up to that moment, we're able to see. And it could be things that have happened over years, where when they were younger, they didn't push back because they were too fearful to. And now they're getting older, they're pushing back. Don't you think it's a real injustice to a child when they're displaying behavior that says, help me, my world is really upside down right now and I don't know what's going on, and that's why I'm being crazy right now and displaying behavior which you don't really like, but it's really me telling you I need help. And then parents go and stick them in timeout, or hit them, or scream at them, or give them other consequences like taking privileges away. So a child is acting out or off track because something's not right in their world, and what they need is their resilient parent to help them navigate through whatever it is to get them out the other side, and instead they get punished for being off track. Don't you think that that would become a built-up sense of injustice in a child that eventually they will push back against?
SubhanAllah. Yeah. I think one of the things we, like I'm certainly guilty of, is we tend to personalize a lot. So every time they, do something that's irritating, frustrating, we feel disrespected, we feel
Mm-hmm.
disobeyed, we feel,
Mm-hmm.
oh, they're not listening to me. Like it's all about us, like it's
Yes.
all about me. And it's very important to be able to distance their behavior from yourself. And that's why I keep saying, Irada, don't personalize. Irada, this has got nothing to do with you. It's got a lot to do with what's going on inside the child, right? It's like,
Yes.
what's happening to this
It's
child's
in
mind?
fact,
What's happening to this child's spirit? Like that, like you said, their inner world, something is not right, right?
yeah. And that's very insightful of you to be thinking like that, because a lot of parents don't. And
I've
one of the first
Yeah.
places for us to look if our children are off track is to look at our own selves. Because what we will find is most of the time they're very off track in times when we're very busy and we haven't actually given them much attention. We've just treated
Yes.
them like they're something that we've got to get through the day, get them fed, get them off to school, pick them up from school, feed them, put them to bed, and we're not actually seeing them as the human being that needs our loving connection, because we're so busy, caught up in, maybe we've got we're working, we're really with work, or maybe
Running
there's
around.
a family event coming up and we're busy trying to get organized for that. And so they're off track because they're feeling disconnected from us. So the very first place to look if our children aren't behaving really well is, how have I been? Have I been my loving self, or have I been my prickly self? If I've been my prickly self, well, it's not surprising everyone around me is starting to act a bit prickly too.
Yes. Connection
Yeah.
is the right word. I've only come to this conclusion recently myself, that relationships are everything. SubhanAllah.
Yep. And
And
especially in the teen years. Once you get to the teen years, if you do not have a good, strong relationship with your teen, you will struggle. You will struggle. That doesn't mean that if you've got to those years, it's too late to develop that relationship. You certainly can. But if you get to those years and you haven't had a relationship and now suddenly everything has gone way off the rails, we're not talking about just off track, like we're sailing off in a completely different direction, which is what some parents find their teens doing. The first place to start is reconnect and reestablish that relationship. And it starts with listening. It doesn't start with talking, it starts with listening. Because our talking, they've switched off. It doesn't do anything anyway. They don't feel heard. So if we want them to listen to us, we have to start listening first. And that listening may not even be them talking to us, because sometimes you can't even get more than a grunt out of them. So there's not much to listen to. That listening can be just noticing, what moods they're in, what's going on. Just be aware.
Observing.
Notice. Yeah. And then when you're really noticing, actually notice that you're noticing, even if you don't say a word, then they can sense it.
Yes.
And then the openings start to open up where you might have a chance to say something. And the first thing you say is not, by the way, when are you going to tidy up your bedroom? It's like something that you can say that is going to build the connection. Like you might have noticed that particularly cheerful a particular day or a particular moment or something. You go, I noticed you were really cheerful yesterday. Did you have a really good day? Something that is going to focus on really building the warmth in the relationship first. Even if you've got something really big you need to tackle them, like you've learned something that they've done or whatever, you have to wait till you build the warmth and the connection with them before you can have a reasonable conversation with them about those things.
Do they say connection before correction? Like always have to connect.
I say that a lot.
Yeah, connection before correction. It's like, they have to plug into you, like the phone that needs charging. They first have to plug into you so that they could correct their own behavior, right? And
And
that's
the
why
other thing is to remember, they're actually not a part of us. They're another individual human being. And everything that any other human being deserves, they deserve. So they deserve to be respected. They deserve to be treated with dignity. They deserve everything that anybody else deserves. But for some reason, because some parents behave with their children like, well, because they're my children, I don't have to give them dignity, and kids get shamed all the time. I don't have to be respectful. It's okay if I shout at them, but they're not allowed to shout at me.
But why do we do that with our own children? Like, I'm a teacher, right? And I'm always very patient in the classroom. I've been at primary school, secondary school. Now I'm at university. But something that I noticed all my 20 years of teaching career, that we give that respect and dignity to other children. Like, I wouldn't be able to shout even at neighbors' kids, even if they're annoying me. But my own kids, I'd be like, the minute they do something like, oh my God, why did you do that? We lose it so very quickly.
And it's really sad because, in fact, they probably deserve more respect and love and compassion from us than other people's children.
Yes. Because the best of you are, the Prophet ﷺ said that the best of you are those who are the best to their family, and I'm among you the best to my family. And
we're all
they are the ones.
And we're all accountable for our flock. We all have a flock, and our flock are part of our flock are our children. So we're going to be accountable for how we showed up in those relationships with our children. So I don't always get it right. Like, sometimes I think it's always good to share the humanness of life and being a parent. And what I have done since I've come to understand myself and human nature and children more, around 2010, for the last 12 years, the difference, because you asking me before what is a difference. One of the big differences is that when I have a moment and I lose it, I always let the children off the hook, and I go, I'm just having one of those days, it's not you. And kids are very, very resilient, because if you let them off the hook, meaning they're not walking around thinking it's their fault. They go, oh, mum's just having a bad day, that's okay. Now, honestly, sometimes when I lose it, my kids laugh because they think I look hilarious, because they're no longer emotionally affected by my emotions, because they know that it's not about them, because I've told them often enough. They're totally resilient to my moments now. So I don't have to be a perfect parent, because there isn't such a thing. I don't have to be a perfect human being, because it's just not possible. But my children are not affected when I'm not having a resilient moment, because they get it. Oh, mum's just not having a resilient moment.
Yeah. Rather than walking around thinking, oh, it's my fault, I've done it again, I screwed up.
Yeah. How often are kids, in our words, are we making them responsible for our feelings? So we're setting them up
all the time. All the time. Like, we do that all the time.
You make me so mad when you do that. You drive me crazy when you do that.
Yes.
We're always telling kids that our emotions are their fault. That's how you break the resilience in children.
By communicating. So the children are born resilient, confident, but then along the line they go through conditioning, mental programming, whatever we call it, mainly due to the environment and the message they're receiving from their environment. So whoever the main guardians, carers, parents, they communicating this message that, oh, I'm upset, and you are responsible for it, or I'm angry and you know, you are at fault, it's your fault. So this is how we break the resilience in children, right? And then
and so kids learn that their parents aren't resilient. And so what I witnessed working with the older teens, so we're talking 17, 18, 19, the ones that are, you know, really moving across to adulthood now, or young adults, that they're getting into trouble and they're not telling their parents or seeking their parents' help because they don't believe their parents will be able to cope with it. And so trying to go through some of life's biggest tests on their own, or seeking the help, if you're in the West, with non-Muslims, or seeking help from other kids their own age who don't have mature you know, solutions to big life problems. And when the parents finally do find out, and I've witnessed this firsthand, the kids were absolutely right. I've had parents passing out in front of me. I've had parents bawling their eyes out and pacing the floor in front of their kids. And so, and the poor kid who has gone through something really serious and needs people in their life to, trying not to give details away to, you know, because it's, you know, don't want to share any personal information. But, you know, that kid, young adult, who really needs someone to say, you know what, that was a really crappy thing to happen and we can figure this out. But what I see happening is when their parents aren't resilient, I've seen them go from being someone who talking to them at this point when it's just happened, very worried about their relationship with Allah and what's happened and their fault in it, and maybe it's a punishment from Allah, and thinking in that terms, to later on seeing them on social media having completely ditched their Muslim identity and not even practicing Islam at all. So lacking resilience as a parent can be exactly what sends your child edge to the other side, which is what parents stress a lot about.
So
it's another reason
they become hopeless, don't they? They become, like, I can see two things in what you're saying: hopelessness and helplessness. They become helpless, and they also become hopeless. Like, I can't see the way out of this. And so what's the point?
I hear from the parents, what I hear from the parents is, what's the family going to say? Your family is overseas. They don't even need to know about this right now. Your child needs you to help them through this. Oh, yes, but what is the family going to say? It's going to bring such shame. And this is where their heads are. And that's why they're not resilient, because they're worried about, you know, presenting this image for everybody to see, rather than appreciating the fact that right now is a critical moment to be really in the parent-child relationship and helping that child figure some things out. And we have our young Muslims harming themselves. We have them resorting to alcohol and drugs. Parents coming to me going, my child, you know, leaves at 1 o'clock in the morning, gets an Uber and goes off clubbing, and like, why is this? I can tell you why. If they've been through things that they need support with. Sorry, my cat is deciding that it's going to rub its back against my computer. That's why it's jiggling everywhere.
It's okay.
Listen, pussycat, you can go down for a minute. Sorry, get down. Where was I thinking? Catch my thinking back.
Yeah, when the children go totally off the rail, the young adults.
Yes, when they're doing things like not wanting to come home at night, wanting to stay awake all night, wanting to be on games all the time, getting hooked into drugs or alcohol, all these sorts of things. I can tell you why. Because what's going on inside of them is so painful that they can't deal with it on their own, and so they just want the noise of their head to go away. if you've got a child that's old enough to have a car, and you hear the car pull up, and you can hear the boom, 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 and they're playing music loud in the car, they're trying to drown out their own thinking. If you can understand the pain they're in that's directing them to behave in that way, then we can start to be the solution to that pain so they don't. But instead we go, oh my God, my Muslim child is doing this, is doing that. And it's the end of the world. And what's the ummah going to say? And what's everyone going to say? And I'm a bad parent. And we get all stressed in our head. And we're no good to them at all.
Yeah.
And they just continue because they don't know how to recover from it on their own, and they need good adults in their life to help them come back on track. And it's got to be done with confidence, compassion, and calm. The confidence being that we're confident enough in ourselves that it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. I really don't give a rat's what anyone else thinks about me as a parent.
But how do you get to that state though, Kathryn? Like, you know, so many women write to me, and even I am like, sometimes we make a decision and we're constantly doubting ourselves, you know, we are living like, oh, am I doing the right thing? Am I overdoing it? Am I underdoing it? You know?
So this is where being a resilient parent kicks in. A resilient parent is one that is in connection with Allah and allowing Allah to guide them through all the parenting challenges. When you're in that state, you don't doubt your choices because you know your decision making is coming from listening to Allah. But if your decision making is coming from your emotions, then of course you're going to doubt it because you're not making your decisions based on solid ground, because emotions are not solid ground. And that's exactly.
Sorry, say that again. So how do we develop that confidence as a parent that, no, you know, what I'm doing is the right thing to do, and I will carry on with this no matter what the world thinks, what everybody else thinks? How do you let go of that pressure and be confident? Like, is it something that comes through books or listening to podcasts?
It comes through understanding. So this is exactly, I was teaching parenting, and I was struggling to get parents to have results because they were lacking the emotional and spiritual resilience they needed to do exactly this. And that's where Back to the Fitrah was born, because it was like, okay, I need to go back one more step. We need to work on the emotional and spiritual resilience. And then the parenting's all going to fall into place. And so that's how Back to the Fitrah was born, because this understanding I came to understand of our human experience is where my emotional and spiritual resilience and confidence and patience and all these other, you know, things that we want to have as our core characteristics, they all naturally came forward again. The thinking, the learned behaviors, patterns, and all the things that were in the way of that started to fall away. And so that's why I'm so passionate about the work I do, because it's not about, well, it's about the fact that every single person listening to this has this inside them already. And it's just a matter of understanding why they're not seeing it, being pointed into the direction of where they will see it, which is in the remembrance of Allah, in connection with Allah, that it all starts to come back on track.
Yeah. One thing that, you know, I can strongly relate to, something that you said, was when I focused on myself, you know, working on my own taqwa, working on my own God consciousness, working on my self-awareness, that's when I started becoming better parent.
Yep.
When I focused, like, okay, forget about the kids, you know, just be you, you know, who you were supposed to be, the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you, that Irada, that, you know, there's not like there's no copy of me in the entire world, right? Just like there's no copy of Kathryn in the entire world. So who does Allah want me to be?
Yeah.
You know, like
And
we all know we will.
Yeah, and that will be moment by moment. Like we don't have to sit here and decide this is how I have to be, because from one moment to the next, something different might be needed
That's
from
so
us.
true. That's so true. Day to
But
day.
when we get
And so I'm
focused on okay, I
constantly.
have to define myself and figure myself out.
No.
Why do you have to do that? You just need to know in this moment.
Yes.
What's needed from me in this moment? How am I of service in this moment? And so I had a situation, just to give you an example of how much I don't care what everyone thinks. We'd just been to Jummah prayer. Bilal, who's now 11, he would have been, I don't know, 3-ish, something that toddler age. We live on the same street at the mosque. For whatever reason, I don't know if he didn't want to leave or what he wanted, but he just decided to launch into a tantrum. Now, tantrums in public are everyone's worst nightmare, right? But I happen to know that when a child has reached tantrum stage, that's a stage where they really need you to stay with them, hold space with them, and let them pass through that feeling. But usually what happens is everybody sticks lollipops in their mouths to try and get them to be quiet. We weren't inside, we were out the front of the mosque. So we were out the front on the footpath. Now, I had a couple of choices. It was right in the middle of the time when Islamophobia was really a big issue. There was lots of stuff happening at that moment. I could have dragged him all the way down the street kicking and screaming and probably created a really bad image for most of our neighbours about us Muslims. Or I could sit on the concrete out the front of the mosque and listen to him, which is what I knew he needed me to do. So I did that. I sat on the concrete. Brothers, sisters, everyone walking past me, leaving the mosque to go to their cars and everything. I didn't care, because I knew right in that moment he needed me to hold the space for these big feelings to come out, and that once they came out, he'd happily walk down the street with me, which he did. He held my hand and skipped all the way down the street once he was done. He wasn't having a tantrum because he wanted anything. He was having a tantrum because something had just got too much for him, and it was all just coming out in that moment. And so that's an example of really not caring other than what my child needed in that moment. And I've had a lot of embarrassing moments, like my older kids, because unfortunately, my first marriage was a very abusive marriage, and my kids experienced a lot. And so my older boys, when they were in their teens, were quite angry. And there was often times when there was a lot of fighting with them. But when I reached the point of being a resilient parent, the very last time I ever had a problem with them, we're in the front yard and we don't have a fence. So all the neighbors, it was just at dusk, I could see neighbors with their heads poking through the window to see what all the noise ruckus was. I had a neighbor down the road going, "Shall I call the police?" And I was going, "No, it's okay, I got this." And I did. I was very calm. And I was just holding them apart with my hands. They're much taller than me, 6'5" each, and I'm 5'11", so a good 6 inches taller than me and quite a lot stronger than me. But my resilience was there to be what they needed in the moment. They needed me to be calm. If I was fearful, if I had lots of thinking going on, if I was even cared about what the neighbors thought, then I wouldn't have been able to bring that situation to a close. It would have escalated, because my fear and my nervousness and everything would have escalated it. But because I was calm, because I had discovered my resilience again, I knew it wasn't about me. I didn't care what anyone else thought, because whatever they're thinking anyway, I can't change that. What I needed in that moment was to protect my boys from each other. And that was the last time, we had a fight like that, because finally I was able to be the parent they needed me to be, to help that tension that they were experiencing as teen boys to defuse. But I was actually not able to defuse it earlier. I just I hadn't become resilient enough myself to be able to not have an emotional response myself. I'd always been having so many fearful thoughts. I was adding fuel to the fire in the moment.
I see.
Innocently.
We've got some sisters joined us live. That just leaves me to you know, the question that we have, like lots of queries that we receive from parents of teens. What are your top 3 advice to parents of teens? If you could just say 3 things: do this, 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 1, 2, 3, you know, everything else will fall into place.
Well, it's not about doing. I think it's about
being.
So, especially with teens, because often the more you do, the worse it becomes. It's not about the doing. It's about the being. Be confident in yourself. Still see them with compassion and have that inner calm. They're the 3 things that will then lead. So listen. I think if there's any doing, it's listen, notice, be aware. Rather than try and correct everything, actually refrain from speaking. Some of the things that have surprised me the most through the teen years is that when I stopped nagging, when I opened up the space for them to do what it was I wanted them to do, they would surprise me and do it. But then when I was on their tail the whole time, they were pushing back against me.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, my eldest is only 15, and some of the things that I've been, like I said, you know, the more I focus on myself, focus on my own, like, inner self, you know, focus on being like patient and compassionate, the better I see everything else coming around. Like, I don't, like, they still talk back, they still rude sometimes, they still answer back, they still say no, but I know it's not about me. Like, you know, they don't have a problem with me. So like I said, I keep saying, don't personalize, it's not about you, you know, there's something going on here. So yeah, having compassionate inquiry into, okay.
I like your inquiry approach. And there's one last thing that I didn't mention, which I think is really important too. Stop taking ourselves and life so seriously. Have a bit of fun with them. When they were little, we had fun with them, but then they got big and we stopped having fun with them, but they still actually like us to have fun with them. Like the other night, just I'm a wally sometimes with my kids. The other night we were waiting for someone to finish doing their wudu, and there was, you know, that bubble wrap on the floor. So I was pretending I was doing tap dancing, because when you step on the bubble wrap, it pops and makes all those noises. So I was pretending to do a river dance or something like that on the bubble wrap while they're all getting the prayer mats ready and everything. They're all looking at me going, "Oh, you're strange, Mom." They like that because, you know, we get too serious about life. Why? I don't know why. I mean, life really isn't that serious.
Yeah, having fun. I read somewhere, you know, even older children like being read sometimes. You know, if sometimes my youngest is 2 and 5. I read books to them, and I can see my older kids, they all come and, you know, snuggle next to me and read to the toddler books, or, you know, small childish books. That they listen, and I can see that they do like spending that time with us. Why? Again, connection, isn't it? It's not like they don't like being around you 100% of the time and getting 1% of your energy, but rather, you know, be with them 1% of the time but give 100% of your energy. Like, just be present together. that's the moment to connect. Because often when I talk about relationship, like, some parents say like, oh, now I have to just sit and read books and play games with them all the time. I'm like, no, it's like 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. It's really like looking out for the opportunities to connect. Because even as a stay-at-home mom, you can be at home all the time, and your child may be at home homeschooling all the time, but you're not together, like, that 100% of the time, maybe only 1% of energy you're giving. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. People think that, like when I talk about connection, they go, yeah, but I'm with my child all day. Yeah, that doesn't mean you're connected with them for a second. You can be with your child all day and not connect with them.
Yes, exactly.
It's not about being present in the room. It's about being present in the emotional space with each other.
Exactly. Exchange of emotions. That's why one thing that I do with my eldest, she doesn't talk much, right? And it's such a struggle to get anything out of her, question after question after question. Sometimes I just go sit in her room, like she could be doing her homework or whatever. I just sit next to her, doing my work. And like you said, I've noticed that she does sense it. She does pay attention. Like after day 3 or 5, she becomes a bit more cheerful. She starts smiling. Although we're not exchanging words, we're just together in the room. It does make a difference. Like, even if you're not saying much.
We underestimate what they want from us. When my eldest was probably about 17, he had braces, and he had 4 younger siblings, and so it was probably rare alone time with me. I hadn't really appreciated that. So I would drive him to and from the orthodontist, and then one day I had an appointment at that time, so my mum offered to take him, and he was so angry with me, and I couldn't work out, why is he so mad? He likes grandma. It was that he felt that his one-on-one time with me had been robbed from him. And I hadn't even realized that going to the orthodontist had become his one-on-one time with me, his time to talk to me and tell me stuff that he couldn't feel like he had the space to tell me because the others were around the rest of the time.
I see, subhanAllah.
And that's what I mean by notice. Because if we're not aware, if we're not noticing, if we're not really listening and seeing what's happening, we miss these cues.
Yeah. I agree. Mashallah.
And if we're in our own emotional state of stress or depression or frustration or overwhelm or any of those sorts of things, we don't see our kids' cues either. That's another reason why it's so important for us to be resilient.
Yeah. So if you could define, resilient parent in a sentence or two, what would you say? Resilient person. So we know the three words that are associated with resilience: confidence, compassion, and calmness, right?
That's what I say. I say that well, what we say is we want parents to be parent with confidence, compassion, and calm in a state of taqwa, tarbiyah, and tawakkul. And then we'll be showing up as a resilient parent. And a resilient parent is not someone who never gets emotional. A resilient parent is someone who doesn't allow their emotions to drive, don't allow their emotions to be in the driver's seat. Wisdom is still in the driver's seat, even though they're having an emotional moment of some kind or another. So it's not about not being emotional. It's about not allowing the emotions to be in the driver's seat.
Take over. Yeah. So emotionally resilient parent is the one who can regulate her own emotions, or
be aware of the emotional state he or she is in and what impact that is having on the children. So if they can sense that their emotional state is having a negative impact on the children, they do something about that.
Yeah, so emotionally resilient parents do not make children responsible for the emotions they're experiencing, right?
Yeah,
So
they take responsibility for them in themselves. They're my feelings, they're my responsibility, and it's my
yes,
responsibility to make sure that because I'm having these feelings, I'm not harming anybody else.
subhanallah, it reminds me another line from, Dr. Gabor Mate's book. He said the best thing parents could give to children is their own happiness, because the moment, imagine your child sees you always rushing, frustrated, annoyed, angry, upset, always in that state, right? And then children will have this weird way of internalizing things like, oh, they're miserable because of me. Like, my parents are having a hard time because of me. And it just reminded me, it's true. The best thing that we could give to our children is our own happiness, or our own joy, or our own peace. Because if we are in a state of, peace and calm, then we're sending out different message, as opposed to if we are in a state of rush and anger and sadness, depression, or all the time. What message are we sending out to kids? That it's about them.
And about the fact that that's what life looks like. It's not a very pretty picture for them to look forward to.
Yeah, yeah. SubhanAllah. Okay, if we have sisters who are joining this live, we have got 5-10 minutes to answer the questions. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to send them through the comments, and we will just wrap up, inshallah. So my last question would be, how, what advice could you give to parents who are struggling to manage stress? Could be due to, full-time work, or some relationship breakdowns, or not being able to establish like boundaries when it comes to devices and gadgets and social media, and how to manage stress.
Yeah. So I think the first thing, which is what I've always done, is take it to the prayer mat. Whenever I've been struggling, I've always, well, my favorite dua to Allah is very simple. It's like help, one word, because Allah knows better than me what help I need. And then realize that we all need support sometimes. It's not a weakness to ask for help. And if you pray to Allah first, it's really interesting how the person that you need will appear before you. In my entire journey, that's always been the case. I'll make dua, and next thing I know, the next thing that I need is right there. And this even happened last week. There was some big tensions that, some things that I was struggling to be emotionally resilient around. And I knew I was, like I have that self-awareness. And I was thinking, I wasn't sure what it was I needed, but I made dua to Allah. And subhanAllah, I also, you do your Taya Camel. I started reading a particular book, and I was really enjoying the book. The next thing, an email popped into my inbox that there was this professional development in the psychological understanding that we teach it back to the Fitrah. They were doing a professional development over this last weekend, and it was starting the next day. And I just felt in my heart, this is the right thing, the next right thing for me to be learning. And so for the last 4 days, I've been getting up and learning at 4:30 in the morning, because being in Australia, it's never at a reasonable hour for us. And exactly what I needed to see right now. And that's how it works.
Yes.
It's not about me sitting here and going, okay, you've mentioned Gabor Mate a few times, and going, you should really read his book. That might not be the thing that's going to call everybody to what to see. Allah knows best. When we make dua, Allah then will guide the person to the book or the person or the course or the whatever it is, the psychologist or whatever it is they need to get the next step of the journey for them to being, their better self. And I think it's a lifetime journey. We're always going to find ourselves getting into challenging spaces. You make dua to Allah. Allah will either resolve it for you, or he will put the person that you need in front of you or the book that you need in front of you. So this would be my biggest advice, because that's what I have lived by for decades now, and it has worked for me every single time.
Yes.
So many people I have reached out for help for. I don't find that to be a bad thing. I think it's a really strong, positive thing to go, not getting something, I need help.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful advice, and the way that the book came to me is another story. But you're right, the how I got hold of, because it is very well known, but that I only found out about him like maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and I've been reading so many parenting books, but it's a different story. But I agree completely. We have a question here from a sister saying, and then we'll just wrap up with this, inshallah. So what advice would you give to someone who is constantly irritable, like everything is a trigger? The children can't fight, cry, scream, jump, everything is a trigger.
So in the words of what I've just been studying over the weekend, since I mentioned that anyway, that sounds like someone who is caught up in low-level thinking, like seeing everything as the cup half empty rather than the cup half full. When we get stuck, we all have patches like this, by the way. So this is not said in a judgmental way. I do it sometimes too. We get stuck in seeing everything from, say, a negative perspective. I call it, rather than negative, like a low-level thinking. So
I call it a state, like
a state of mind. It is a state of mind.
This is something that I discovered about myself. I'm constantly in a state of mind, and I always say what I am today is not going to be who I am today. I mean, what I was yesterday is never going to be who I am today, because I'm now in a different state of being, the whole being, because we're constantly evolving, like day-to-day experience, we every day evolving. So I always try to remind myself, one thing that I find very empowering and lifting me up is who I was even last week or last month is never going to be who I am today. So I can change my state of being, and sometimes we do get caught up in different states.
And so this person who's asking here, it's not the sort of question that I can answer without listening to them, because each and every one of us can be in that sort of constant state of irritability for different reasons. It could be that we're having difficulty in a relationship, and so because that's playing in our mind all the time, we find that any interruption by the kids is like a distraction, and we're irritable towards the children because we're trying to figure something out in our mind, not realizing that we're innocently churning something that's not going to be beneficial to churn anyway. And obviously it's not helpful to the relationship with the kids because we're prickly. We can also be irritated because we've got physiological things going. If we're extra tired or we're sick, we don't have as much capacity, or we're not resourced as well to manage the extra noise or the extra work and those sorts of things. And so they have this thinking in our head, it's all too much, I can't do it. And so then the irritability comes out. But an irritability problem, there's no biological reason for it. It's usually simply a stuck thinking problem, that there's a pattern of stuck thinking there. And if I have people who come to me like this, it's a matter of listening to hear what is it that is stuck to help unstick it, because it can be just one thought and bam, whatever it is gone, and they're moving on.
Because we when you are in that state of, you know, overthinking, that overturning mind that never shuts down, you lose clarity, you know.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
sometimes it's very simple thing, like I say it to sisters, or sometimes like I go to someone with this something that I've been thinking for days, and they say something and I'm like, oh my God, you know, I couldn't think of that.
Yeah.
And you're right,
And
you know.
it's just one thought, and bam, all that churning is now stopped, because it's like, oh,
Yes,
okay, hadn't thought of it like that.
yes. And you're right, you know, and overthinking, the reason we overthink is we don't have someone who can share it with without the fear of being judged, without the fear of being misunderstood, without the fear of being, oh, what if they get me wrong? Or what if they think this, that about me, you know? And this is why we don't share, like, whatever is bothering, you know, something is bothering you, and you just keep analyzing it,
I'll
doing the
take
mental aerobics in your head. And actually, if you sometimes I talk to my husband, you know, something is really, really bothering me, and he says something, it's a very different perspective, and I'm like, actually, yeah. And then the next day the thought is gone, you know, you get like clarity. So yeah, you have to have that one person who you can talk to
Guess what?
with a
You actually don't, because you can have that conversation with Allah for a start, but thinking that you need to have that conversation in order to be okay is about being okay, because it's actually not true. You can have that one thought that you're talking about all by yourself without having a conversation, and it all to be okay, just like that. You don't have to actually speak to someone for that to happen.
Really, I found in my
Yeah,
experience, when I speak to someone, I get clarity. As opposed, if I'm just doing the self-talk, talking to myself back and forth, you know, you can have conversation with yourself back and forth,
sure.
back and forth. I lose the, you know, I get lost in the loop of
Yeah.
like
So if you're
thinking.
talking
And
to the right, if you're talking to the right person, that can be really helpful, because what you need is somebody to just listen and not interject,
yes,
so that you can actually
exactly.
process it. And
Sometimes they
that's
don't even say
fine.
anything and just listen.
Exactly. That's right. So basically all that they're doing is helping you say it out loud, and when we say it out loud, we don't seem to get so stuck in the loop.
Yes, yes,
But talking to someone could actually complicate things if you get someone who then wants to fix it for you, and they don't necessarily know what is the right thing for you, and so then they lead your thinking in a different direction where you just get more complicated. So we don't want to
finding the
leave
right
the message
person.
that you have to talk to someone, because the other thing is, I very rarely talk to people unless I'm completely stuck. If I have a really, really stuck moment, I'll talk to someone. Mostly I'll go for a walk, because just the
Yeah.
quiet lets it settle, and then I can see clearly, and it's like, what was I thinking?
Yes, yes, and walking has definitely helped me. You know, I was having anxiety, and I kept telling to people in my course, in the BU course that I'm running at the moment. When it comes to overthinking, anxiety, you know, depression, mild depression, one thing that has really helped me is walking. And I try to walk 3 times a week, and it really got me through tough times. You know, it helps me to get grounded, it helps me to contemplate, and it just gives me clarity. It just gives me so much clarity just looking at trees and birds and contemplating and on the nature of life is being very thorny and test and being very temporary. It just like, you know, like your stress levels is like going up, 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 and then you go for a walk and then it's like, oh, it's like, and I experienced the same sensation. Like I have a friend who know that she understands me. You know, she doesn't judge, she doesn't she doesn't misunderstand me, and she's always there. And I find it the same, that if I'm having stuck moment, that the overturning mind keeps analyzing the same thing, and I just talk to her, and it just goes down again. And it does help with irritability, because when you are in that state of mind, overthinking, overturning, it does make your behavior impulsive, because you are irritable.
Yeah. And it's very hard to solve a problem with an irritable mind.
Yeah. I think you need, the sister, I think you have to, I don't know, it depends on the degree of the irritability. Maybe like that's why people seek therapy, or they go to coach, and they go to, get, what is it that is bothering you? Is it relationship problem, or is it, whatever has been happening in your life at the moment? Oh, she's saying, Jazakallah khair, beautifully answered. Okay, alhamdulillah. If you found it helpful, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. I think the most important thing is you make dua to Allah and know He opens the door for you for whatever it is you need.
Absolutely.
Because He will resolve it for us, either through an experience, or He'll just bring insight to us, or He'll put the right person in front of us to talk to. However, He knows what's best for us.
Absolutely, subhanallah. Okay, and the one last thing, if you could recommend any books for building emotional resilience.
My book that I've just got to do the final edit so we can send it off to go and get published.
MashaAllah.
Is very soon, inshallah, and it's called Naked Happiness: The Secret to Stripping Down to Your Emotional and Spiritual Resilience. So it's
MashaAllah.
Actually all on this topic, but it's not quite published yet.
MashaAllah, may Allah grant tawfiq, inshallah.
If you want to read something that's written from an Islamic perspective, you can read Mamoon Yusuf's book, Inside the Soul of Islam. You can get my other book, which is called Step Up, Embrace the Leader Within, which is really aimed at Muslim women.
I've read that one.
Yeah, so that one is about emotional resilience too. And if you want a book that is a really easy read, it's not from an Islamic perspective, but it's from a human experience perspective, which fits with Islam. I mean, it's the psychological understanding that we teach it back to the Fitrah. There's two books I would recommend, which are written by Sydney Banks. One is called The Enlightened Gardener, and it's basically a conversation between a gardener who understands how human life works, and a bunch of psychologists who have studied how it works but obviously don't get it, and this gardener kind of enlightens them. That's why he's the enlightened gardener. There's another the reason I think these books are so powerful is they're written like a fiction novel, but in fact one character is leading the other character through the journey to resilience, and so you don't feel like you're reading a book that's teaching you something, but it actually is through the story of it. It's brilliant. The other book is called Second Chance, and it's basically about a man that is, running away from his troubles to the Hawaiian Islands, and he meets another man who is the enlightened one in this situation, and it's just a dialogue between them. And by the end of the story, the man that's running away from his life and feels like his life is just not worth it anymore just sees everything from a different perspective. And so again, it's about a dialogue between them. And you
by
just
the same author, Sydney Banks?
Yeah, Sydney Banks. Yeah,
Sydney Banks. Okay, I'll look into them. Jazakallah khair. I've never heard of them, mashallah. So he's Allah is guiding me to these books here right now, right, to get some insight, maybe there will be something that will help me to solve the next problem I experience in life, inshallah. And Jazakallah khair for the sisters for attending today's live. The sister is saying, this is definitely one of the answers to my many du'as. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
It was honored to have you here, Kathryn. Jazakumullah khair once again for being on the show. We have everybody else who is listening us live. We have more webinars coming up this week and next week leading up to the Ramadan. Please subscribe to the channel. Leave your thoughts and feedback in the comments section. Share it with friends and family, and check out Kathryn Jones on social media. Mashallah, she's got really beneficial content that I have benefited a lot.
Yes, we've got a parenting summit coming up in about 3 weeks' time that they should look out for on social media. We're just about ready to share it out there, called Parenting the Prophet's Way Summit,
Mashallah.
inshallah. So
Mashallah.
yeah, look
Mashallah.
out for that on social media.
Mashallah. Jazakallah khair. So remember the 3 words associated with resilient parents: confidence, calm, and
compassion.
Compassion, yeah. So if you could walk away with anything from today's session: confidence, calm, and compassion, right? Inshallah. So subhanakallahumma bihamdik, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.